Welcome to another episode of Monster Monday from the Ready to Die channel. This series explores the design of a creature I have built for Pathfinder Second Edition. The stat block for this creature can be found over on the Monster Monday blog, as well as the Twitter and Discord, all of which are linked below. I have an interesting subject this week, as I've actually built a version of this creature for a full build Friday in the past. Per request from one of my brothers, I'm revisiting the Talon from DC Comics, built this time for Monster Monday. This creature felt less like a monster to me, and more along the lines of an NPC, and I have designed it as such. This could be built in a range of levels, and so I had to just kind of settle on something. I leaned more into their original place in the world, where they were the enforcers and killers for a secret cabal whose reach seemed rather limited to a city. They are extraordinarily proficient in this task, but their primary adversaries and targets are non-powered humans, which I sought to account for. I talked with my brother a bit, and we settled on level 6 for this creature. While Talons in DC Comics do serve in life, we wanted to represent them after their death, where they are pumped full of Electrum and turned into unstoppable killing machines. As such, they use the undead trait, and that about covers the core concepts of this creeping killer. There wasn't a particular roadmap to follow for this fellow, but it starts off with a high dexterity and strength bonus, as while many of them have very acrobatic fighting styles, the Electrum infusing their bodies also makes them physical menaces. Not far behind this is a moderate charisma, which is a little less representative of the Talons, but is a specific use for this build, where I ended up placing some import on intimidation and deception. Then, where the Electrum restores the Talon, revitalizes them, they aren't quite as hardy and have a constitution between low and moderate. They round out their ability scores with a low intelligence and wisdom. A Talon is meant to serve, not necessarily to think. On that topic, the Talon only uses a moderate perception, even if its undead nature gives it dark vision. As an assassin, the Talon is used to having the drop on enemies, and as such, maybe isn't quite on guard as it should be. When it comes to skills, the Talon has quite the collection. With its focus on dexterity and many of them having come from a lifetime in the circus, this stat block uses a high acrobatics and stealth, with the latter being something the Talon developed more from its time as an assassin. A moderate athletics helps them scale buildings, circus lore reflects their background, and thievery helps them infiltrate the abodes of their targets. They use a low deception and intimidation, though these skills still have some use in their kit. The former may actually be important for getting off feints. Their final skill is a low society, so that they can identify their targets with greater ease, and learn how to move among people unnoticed. Like many NPCs, the Talon comes packed with a wide variety of skills, and should make pretty good use of them. We'll get into that a bit more when we start discussing abilities, but first, we have to look at the defenses of this Dark Death dealer. I'm going to switch things around just a tiny bit, and start by talking about the Talon's health, which uses a moderate value. It has negative healing as is standard for an undead, but more importantly it has regeneration, based on the Electrum in its body constantly rebuilding it, just continually refreshing, rehealing it. I followed the directions of the GMG for determining the value of its regeneration, and I originally thought it seemed a bit high, but it did turn out to work out perfectly fine in the mash. Notably, this regeneration is only stopped by cold damage, and somebody that tested this out beforehand said that they changed that. I understand that sentiment, and if your players for some reason refuse to even consider cold damage, maybe you have to do the same. But I would try to avoid that if possible. I would give your players the chance to get some cold stuff, maybe leave frost vials or something like that around. Or have it be an environmental thing that they can somehow trigger. And I say this because I think there's a point in keeping this as cold damage. Because while the regeneration means they can't kill it, they can still down it, and then either flee or try to bury it and then run away. I understand that's not something the players always want to do, but that is what this creature does. It hunts endlessly until the heroes finally figure out a way to stop it. It's actually very akin to a slasher in that regard, and I think GM should be playing up that aspect in design. This can be less of a straight up combat and a little bit more of a puzzle fight. With all that said, the Talon only uses a moderate armor class, since the regeneration makes them unafraid of attacks. They know that they can heal through one, and that plays into an ability that we'll discuss shortly. Before that, we should take a look at their saves, which are fairly straightforward. As a rogue type sort of foe, they've got that high reflex, followed by a moderate fortitude. It's not their main gem, but their undead nature makes them a little difficult to put to a stop. Now, one of the steps to making a Talon is breaking their mind to serve the Court of Owls. So the final save, its will, is going to be a low value. Actually, a point below the suggested low value. On the plus side, we do have those undead immunities going for us. When it comes to playing offense, the Talon is again fairly simple, at least at first glance. While in the comic, the Talons wielded a variety of weapons based on their origins and preferences, and which I encourage you to do with your own Talon, most use a set of throwing knives, which are the main weapons represented here with the Talon knife. This can be used in melee with the finesse trait, has the agile trait to make follow-up attacks slightly better, and can be thrown a decent range on top of that. However, even with that all being said, these daggers don't even deal low damage. Their average is only a 10, compared to the average low damage being 12. The reasoning behind this actually comes from the Talon's very first ability, its sneak attack. This is a fairly standard and straightforward ability for monsters where they remove a lot of the details and simply grant the user an extra 2d6 precision damage against off-guard targets. This 2d6 extra damage averages out to 7, and adding that to the average damage of our strike puts it just below the high damage. And that sits about right with me. Regeneration is strong, as we've talked about, and so I wanted the damage from the Talon to be a bit more situational, something that has to work to get. The Talon does have another passive ability in the form of Acrobatic Flair, inspired by the association that they often have with circuses. This combines a few effects, giving them that ability to jump around with their acrobatics, but also grants them the effects of Tumble Behind, where they can tumble through an enemy to make them off guard. One of the reasons for including this is that the Talons in the comics were often intended to act alone, so they need ways to make somebody off guard without relying on a flank. That being said, despite the high bonus on the Talon, I actually struggled to pull this off a bit in the Monster Mash. The dice weren't in my favor on those particular rolls, but given some other factors, I can't complain about that too much. In the comics, the Talons almost have a bit of a catchphrase when they come knocking, often declaring that the Court of Owls has sentenced you to death, and I wanted to feature that as an actual ability. Sentence to death lets the Talon make a demoralize with a bonus that increases it to a moderate value. On a success, this makes an enemy frightened as normal, but also adds effects inspired by and based upon Dread Striker and the Hobgoblin's Remorseless Lash, making them off guard while frightened and unable to reduce that value as long as the Talon is hitting them. This is a pretty nasty combo, but the Talon can only have one creature sentenced at a time, and if it can't land that blow and the creature is able to drop the Frighten, the Talon can't sentence them again for 24 hours. They have to live, that can't be the right word, with the shame. Aside from this means of debilitating enemies, the Talon also has Hobbling Slice. This is mainly to be used against victims that try to flee, making specific cuts to limit their movements, making them slower and easier to hit, though any amount of healing removes this. This is one of those standard powerful sort of attacks, but instead of offering more damage, since the Talon gets that from its sneak attack, it's about making the enemy easier prey. That leaves us with two abilities to discuss, and both of these kind of play off of each other. We'll have to start with Catch Blade, which is a reaction inspired by their undead nature and their healing ability. When the Talon gets attacked with a piercing or slashing weapon that cuts into their immortal undead body, those weapons can get stuck in there, as the flesh sort of grows, heals around them. It isn't too difficult to remove it, requiring only a moderate DC check to remove, and this check can be done with acrobatics or athletics, so that dex or strength-based martials both have a chance to recover it. However, if an enemy fails to reclaim their weapon before the Talon's next turn, the Talon gets the opportunity to twist from hands. Using the leverage of its own body, the Talon attempts to disarm the target, and gets the effects of a critical success just by rolling a success. I kept this to 2 actions because stripping heroes of their weapons is brutal, especially when the Talon can then turn that weapon on them. Plus, if the Talon manages to roll a crit, it leaves the enemy off guard, just in time for the Talon to strike them with its new weapon. With all that said, the Talon is now complete, for the second time in association with this blog. This cruel and callous cadaver carves through capes and cowls to cut crusaders to the quick, only caught and contained by the cold. This was a fun one to put together and figure out, especially with balancing its offensive and defensive capabilities. When it comes to using the Talon, I think it makes for a good encounter to either have one set on the heroes, or going after somebody important that the heroes need for one reason or another. As I've said, I would suggest keeping the cold deactivation of its regeneration, and while maybe providing resources for your heroes, leave it up to them to figure out how to make it work, how to actually stop this creature. Let me know what you think of it and what other sorts of creatures you would like to see in a comment. If you want to check out the other versions of this monster, including the full build Friday of it, or other monsters I've made, check out the blog or Discord, which are linked in the description. Thanks for watching, and have a monstrous Monday.
Run.